जय भारत। वेलकम टू डेफ टॉक्स क्लिप्स बाय आदि अचिंत। जैसे ही आपने मेरे बड़े चैनल जो डेफ टॉक्स बाय आदि है उसको आपने जिस तरह से सपोर्ट करा, उसी तरह से ये हमारे क्लिप्स के चैनल को, जहां पर आपको छोटे छोटे अपडेट्स, छोटे छोटे शॉर्ट्स और छोटी छोटी कहानियां मिलेंगी, इसी को भी सपोर्ट जरूर कीजिएगा। लाइक का बटन जरूर दबाइए, सब्सक्राइब तो ऑब्वियसली करिए, बेल आइकॉन दबाना बिल्कुल मत भूलिएगा। एंड हाँ जी, प्लीज अपने दोस्तों के साथ, फैमिलीज के साथ ये वीडियोस जरूर शेयर करिएगा। एंजॉय करिए ये क्लिप को। जय हिंद। Jai Hind, Jai Bharat, and welcome to Dev Talks. This is Adi Achint. I have with me one of my favorite people to talk to, who is expert of the Southeast Asia, Indo-Pacific, and I think her repertoire is increasing every time I talk to her because she brings in a total new, different angle. Miss Cleo Pascal, thank you so much for joining. It's always an honor to talk to you, and always real amount of fun.
Thank you. Yeah, I can't keep down a job. I keep getting kicked out of areas, and so I have to go find new areas. That's basically what's happening.
That's what that works for you then.
Uh,
Because you were in India and I saw what you had to say with regards to what's happening in the region. Very balanced approach, but of course it's a very scary thing because of I'd put it in two ways: the decline and the aggression of China. And as the decline is kind of increasing, uh, the decline rate increases, the aggression seems to be going up in the same uh, quantum. So how do you analyze Chinese actions within the region, just to begin with, and then we can go into area specific and talk about those things.
yeah, sure. It's a good question. I'm in Washington D.C. now, and you get a lot of what Captain James Fennell, the former head of intelligence for the Pacific Fleet, calls threat deflation, where there's a lot of excuses thrown around for why China isn't a problem. Economic decline or demographics or all that sort of stuff. But as you said, if you look at what the actual actions are, you don't see the fleet getting smaller.
Yep.
You don't see the footprint decreasing. You don't see the international community aggression decreasing either. So it's a question of have we reached what you often hear is peak China? And for me, the relevant question is have we reached the peak amount of damage China can do? And I don't think we're anywhere close to that. We've talked about this before. Um, I also I also think, unfortunately, that there are very few limits on what the Chinese Communist Party would do. We've seen what it does with fentanyl or with COVID or things like that, and the amount of damage that can be inflicted in uh, in the sort of unrestricted warfare that they're willing to engage in can be quite extreme. And the end state, this of kind of making the world safe for the Chinese Communist Party, which effectively means getting rid of or uh, severely damaging democracies and competing systems, like for example India's or others, is it's not declining. It's not. It's an imperative, and like you said, whether the economy is declining, it's not going to. It may make them more dangerous, but they're definitely dangerous anyway.
That's the whole point. I mean, the I guess the for the lack of a better word, frustration of being kind of reduced, uh, both organically and of course by a lot of pressure of the rest of the world, has to come out somewhere. I want to start with the posture which is there in the South China Sea, in the Indo-Pacific region, between the US and the Chinese. We see
I just actually just
again.
I'm sort of thinking through what you're saying, and it's interesting because the world has if India had been treated with the largesse that China has been treated,
Mhm.
India would be booming economically, would have excess capacity for, as India's economy grows, its neighbors' economies grow. Nepal's
Mhm.
economy grows, Sri Lanka's grows, the whole region grows, which isn't necessarily what you see with China's neighbors. So there hasn't been there's been a concerted effort on the part of key components of the West to build China up for decades, to engage, to pump in money still. So it's not it's not the world has not been isolating and punishing China, and what China has done with that boom hasn't helped the world. Uh, and you often hear, you'll hear Thucydides trap and all that sort of stuff. And my way of trying to think through whether that actually has any logic to it is replace the word China with India. So you'll hear, a
Mhm.
rising power always tries to, you know, conquer the existing. Well, India didn't. India's a rising power. It's not
Mhm.
trying to uh, create a South China Sea in the Indian Ocean. So there's something. It's always worth testing those assumptions. Ex- you know, China's 100 years of humiliation. Well, India had, if you want to use that way of looking at it, 300 or 400 years of humiliation. If that's and that's not how India is dealing with that
No.
past at all. So there's a I, tr- I try to make sure that what the way that I analyze or think about China is based on comparative logic and not a narrative that has been put in my head through another way.
That's very interesting because that's what everybody talks about. Okay, these guys suffered, those, so we support them and this and that. I don't think India has ever put across a narrative saying that we suffered. Yeah, we did. There's no question about it. Millions died, but that's part of history. We embrace it. Uh, we learn from it. I guess that's the whole thing.
It's the
But that's
difference
very
between being a victim and being a survivor, right? So, India survived all of that, and it has come out with incredible strength um, and knowledge, and moving forward and building off of it. I mean, there are other cultures that are like that, that are like that also. You
resilience.
Yeah, yeah, and but if the narrative is of victimhood in this context, then it seems legitimate to use it to justify bad behavior. So you'll hear also, another thing that you'll hear is fentanyl is just revenge for the opium wars, right? The Chinese pumping it. Well, first of all, the Americans weren't involved in the opium wars, but second of all, the, the opium wars were bad. You don't do something bad to counter something else, but you try to learn from that and move on. So it just, you have to be really, I personally have to be very careful to make sure that what I think is actually what I think, and not what somebody else is trying to get me to think. um, which is, why India was so smart to ban TikTok, because TikTok is one of the main vectors of that mental contagion. And we saw it around the division between the youth in the US's view of what's happening in Israel and Gaza versus the majority of the population, older population.
One of the biggest things that we see geopolitics in China be judged by is a zero sum game.
Hmm.
Uh, because when you जय हिंद, जाने से पहले मैं 1 मिनट के लिए आपको रोक लूं, तो प्लीज ये चैनल को लाइक जरूर करिएगा, सब्सक्राइब करिएगा, और हाँ, हमारे जो मेन चैनल को जरूर जरूर अपनी फॉलोशिप दीजिए, ताकि हम आपको अच्छे अच्छे पॉडकास्ट, इंपॉर्टेंट सब्जेक्ट्स एंड जियोपॉलिटिकल अपडेट से आपके सामने प्रेजेंट करते रहें इसी तरह से। थैंक यू सो मच। जय हिंद, जय भारत।